Hello, everyone. Mike here, doing a solo podcast. Of course, I'm usually doing it with either Jeff or Mitchell, but I decided to kind of do my own thing with it. Um, Seeing that I have a little more time on my hands, I felt that maybe now would be a good time to kind of branch out my podcasting more, kind of do my own thing. So I made my own YouTube account and started for what is now known as the Mike Whitmer podcast. You can catch it on YouTube. I also will update it on Twitter and let you know on that. But in this podcast, I kind of go about talking about whatever's kind of on my mind, whether it be sports, entertainment, news, whatever kind of comes across my mind, and anything I feel would be interesting to talk about. I give my opinion on, or just kind of how I feel about it, or whatever. But let's kind of get started on my first podcast here. I was going to post a little later, just before I get into it. I did a couple test podcasts a couple months ago that I'll post on the video if you want to kind of get a little glimpse of what I've talked about in the past. I'll also link the Mike and Mitch podcast YouTube page, where you can catch all of the ones that I've done with Mitchell and Jeff Quick, of course. But today I feel like talking about hockey a little bit, um, which might be at first the majority of what I talk about, especially with Flyers camp coming on. I am a sports fan, Philadelphia sports fan, but mostly just Flyers and Phillies. But at the moment, I'm just kind of focusing on the Flyers, so most of the things I'll talk about sports-wise will probably revolve around the Flyers, NHL, kind of that sort of thing. Just kind of get people understanding where I'm coming from. But um, anyways, last night the Flyers held their rookie game of 2018 against the New York Islanders rookie team. Um, I did see it. I saw the whole game. I don't know if that says how much time I have on my hands or not, but I did that. And just some things that kind of stuck out to me was uh, Lindblom, obviously, who had about 5 points last night. That first line of Lindblom, Vorboyov, and Turinsky was great. There was some sluggishness in the first period, but I feel like that might have just been all of them kind of trying to get their bearings down. This was the first game in a couple months. Even Hart, when he was playing in the first two periods, the first period was a little shaky, which you probably could understand them coming into the first game, but he picked it up near the second. He made a bunch of good saves, was able to get rebounds and control everything. He only led by the 3 goals that came in the first period. The Flyers obviously won 5-3, in case people didn't know or whatever. But a couple things that I was kind of focusing on just before the game started, what I wanted to focus on was, one, seeing how Lindblom was going to do during it, and I want to see how Myers was, and also how Phil Myers was in that game too, because I hadn't really seen much of him since he was in the Phantoms. I didn't really see much or get to see much of him last preseason and everything, just with school and everything, and I didn't really have time to really pay attention to it. But what I saw from Myers was good. Um, I think with Andrew McDonald going down, that there's a spot possibly open for him. He has to be falling out, I think, because he'll probably get it, and if he doesn't, if they bring a 7th person, it might be someone else, and Myers might just be sent down because they're going to want him to get playing time other than being in the press box. But Phil Myers played great. He really, on the defensive end of it, he didn't really do much offensively or anything, but defensively he looked good. He was making plays when he could. He looked pretty good on the power play or penalty kill. They let one go by on shorthanded, but outside of that, they actually did pretty well defensively. for a young group of uh, inexperienced kind of players at the moment, not really having much pro experience. But I think that year with the Phantoms really helped Myers. And obviously another thing that was coming into it was how well he would play, since after development camp he was hurt, but it was a precautionary reason to keep him out. So this was just something that seemed something I wanted to focus on, because he's one of our future defensemen, um, or one of our packed defensemen that can come up. Obviously, last season with playing with Sanheim, he played really well, and he continued into the playoffs for the Phantoms. So we'll have to see when he comes up, if he comes up this season at all. I hope he does, but if he does, I still think even with the McDonald injury, that'll probably be at best, if there's an injury, kind of like a Sanheim last season or a Shane Gostisbehere the season before. But outside of that, some other things that pointed out to me, obviously, Lindblom, I thought who was going to have a good game just because he had some NHL experience last season playing not or like 20 or so games. I don't really know off the top of my head, but he definitely had played a role in the Flyers at points last season. But he spent majority of the season in the Phantoms. But and in the playoffs, we didn't really see much of him. He started the first few games, but he was eventually in the press box, and he didn't really kind of show up really, or whatever. It might have just been he was tired near the end. But anyways, that was the person I was looking out for, and he obviously played great, which you would kind of hope, because he's more experienced than most that were playing in the game. But he had 5 points, 3 goals, and 2 assists. They were quick. He was quick. He was making plays. He did good forechecking on the Vorboyov goal, the last goal, the sixth and final goal the Flyers scored. Or sorry, it was 6-3. Sorry, not 5-3. The sixth goal that they scored. But there was a lot to be excited about for this. That I was excited about for this game. Just seeing, if just as a Flyers fan, just seeing your prospects kind of come up and play in one game, just seeing what your future could possibly look like. There was always some things I was obviously Morgan Frost was another person I was looking at. He looked good on he at times kind of didn't wasn't really that noticeable, but on the power play he played great. He pretty much took over like the Giroux spot for the team, which if it comes down to it, when he comes to the Flyers at some point, I think he could be a good fit for that Giroux spot. He looked like he fit in well there. He knew the place. He has a great hockey sense. Obviously, he still has some time or a little bit to develop, but what I saw from him in his first game was good. And obviously, I can't really take that much out of it because it was just a rookie game. It really kind of means nothing, kind of just some experience for the guys to get out there and game action. But now that the camp is officially starting in a couple of days, this is just something to kind of get excited for. And obviously I was excited for it. But they had great speed. They had a lot of good things. They scored quickly. Like, they had 2 quick goals in the first 5 minutes of the game, but there was just a lot of back and forth in the first period. It was very wide open, but then the second period on, it kind of was a little more tightening up. The Flyers kind of, from what I kind of took from it, really kind of, until like the last maybe 10 or so minutes of the game, really kind of controlled most of it. They had Hart, who's obviously what you'd probably expect. He didn't play great at the beginning, but he rebounded and in his second period, he bounced back, and they took him out in the third period, obviously, because it's just the rookie game, and there's no reason to really play him, and they wanted to see how their backup would do, but how how their backup would do and everything. So it should be interesting to see how they go forward from here. Liam Hughes, that's who their backup was for the game. But there's obviously some things to be excited about coming into camp, which I've talked about numerous times with Jeff over the past couple weeks or so on the Mike and Mitch podcast, which obviously we talk mostly about Flyers and everything, but this is just kind of giving my 2 cents, just without them kind of here. What I saw from the first line actually looked really good. Terensky had a bunch of good opportunities. The forechecking looked great. They had good speed. Even Frost had a breakaway at one point. Their penalty kill looked great. Rupstov defensively looked good, but another guy that kind of wasn't really that noticeable at times. Ratcliffe is another guy I wanted to pay attention to. He's kind of a guy that I'm kind of high on, just because I like his size and I like what he kind of brings, because it's not really somebody you really see at his size to bring good skills and good hands and everything and speed, but or good, decent speed, but he does, so that's something I'm kind of excited for, especially for the future look at the Flyers, because they don't, offensively, they don't really have the biggest of forwards, so Isaac Ratcliffe is obviously someone who would bring the size and everything. So when it comes down to it, if they lose if they lose Simmons this offseason, I don't think it would be the biggest of deals in the next couple of years to kind of find that front presence, because he is obviously someone that could kind of fill it. But at the same time, at the end of last season, they even put Nolan Patrick on that first power play, so that should be something to keep an eye on. But Isaac Ratcliffe had a couple good looks from I saw. He was on the first penalty kill, or power play. He was on the penalty kill as well. I got this mixed up, but he was on both. He played okay. He didn't really do anything that really that noticeable or anything, but he had some good opportunities. He set up guys. He did well defensively when it was called upon, especially after the first penalty kill. I felt near the end, he did really well blocking the shot and getting it down or clearing it, and that's something I feel that's something that the Flyers themselves need to work on. But that gets me a little excited that some of the Flyers prospects are a little more defensive oriented, to do the little things that kind of you don't really notice, but the coaches like Dave Haxtell or Ron Hextall will notice and say, hey, that's something of value, something that Sean Couturier had for his career, but everyone was saying he isn't a great player yet because he hasn't had the offense, which I think isn't the greatest of arguments, because I've always found Couturier to be a great forward, especially shutting down people, but his offense obviously this past year having his career year, and you hope it continues, but I don't think it's the biggest of deals when if you can find other guys that can kind of bring the offense, I think he can put in a couple good defensive guys that can put up some points, which Couturier does, and I'm not saying that Isaac Ratcliffe or even German Rupstov, another guy that I was kind of interested in seeing how he was, and another guy who's good on the penalty kill and everything. But those are guys that I don't know if they're going to end up being like Couturier, but I can see them being players like Couturier. But Isaac Ratcliffe more offensively, but German Rupstov kind of someone who's been defensively oriented for majority of his junior career, and just recently, or what the Flyers want him to kind of focus on now is this offense, obviously, but he's going to be on the Phantoms this season, his first season with the Phantoms, so we'll see how he transitions into the professional game from juniors, if it changes any, or if it's something that maybe he's a player that kind of turns around in his professional game, and that's where he kind of becomes the player that he will be. And juniors, it's kind of he did good, but he had injury problems, so that's another thing you kind of have to focus on him with, which is a couple players for the and the system for the Flyers, like Myers has had injury issues. Sam Morin, obviously, especially last season, he's had issues there and everything, so which sucks for him, but kind of opened up this opportunity for Myers to kind of get some of the spotlight, and we'll have to see if he can continue how he played in that rookie game all preseason. It might be a difficult decision for Ron Hextall and the Flyers to kind of make for to take over for McDonald's out for the first couple of weeks of the season, but we'll have to see how that goes. I still think it's most likely going to be Fullen, just because if you see or hear what Ron Hextall and Dave Hextall kind of sound kind of high on him. They want to see him play. It's okay. I just hope he actually doesn't end up being like or it doesn't come back to bite him. Even though I would like to see some of the younger guys, but I can understand the reasoning to put some veterans in there, and obviously they've said that they're still looking for some veterans to bring in too, just because of the injury and everything. Because this is a young Flyers team, don't get me wrong, but there's still some things that I feel like they're not comfortable just yet in putting some younger guys together without a veteran or whatever. So whether it's this season that changes or next season where you see more younger guys taking over some of the veteran spots, which you probably will see more next season because a bunch of the guys like Yuri Laterra and others are free agents, so we'll see how the Flyers kind of focus on that next offseason. Basically kind of how they'll play this season, and if they play well enough for the Flyers to want to bring them back. So we'll have to see how that goes. Obviously, there's still some things to be excited about. Only like 3 days now until camp officially starts. So obviously, some of the veterans are here with the rookies. Rookie camp pretty much just ended or was going on a bit. I think this rookie camp kind of ended it. But there's still things to be excited about. There's obviously news around the NHL daily, but I did see something that Bob McKenzie tweeted out saying about Erik Karlsson trade rumors or whatever, that if he were to be traded today or tomorrow or like sometime near the future, that he'll most likely go to the Western Conference, which has kind of been the feeling for like the past like month or so, that if he is traded, it's going to be to a Western Conference team. That obviously kind of is what Ottawa kind of feels like, because even when they traded Hoffman, they went to the Western Conference. So I don't think they're very comfortable trading in conference. So and their thing is they might just be offering a little too much for Erik Karlsson. And obviously, if somebody really wants him, they'll pay the price. But if it's too high, then they're not going to risk it. And that's probably why it's taken him so long to be traded. And if he isn't traded in the next couple of weeks, he'll either be traded at the deadline or he is going to walk at the end of the season, because I don't see any way in which he continues his career in Ottawa at all. They're kind of been a train wreck, but yeah. Um, but I think for my first podcast back, I think I kind of got everything from the rookie game. Just some things that I think um, people should kind of look out for just before I head off. But some players to look at for training camp and everything. Just keep an eye on, obviously, like stars that you would think of, like Myers and Frost and Hart, but still keep your eyes on for Ratcliffe. He's someone who might not make it, but he's someone that can be excitable. He's big. He's something that I think Flyers fans will be excited to see. Verboyev played well last night, so that could make it difficult for the third line center spot. Maybe he could possibly, out of all the younger guys, he might have the best options, but I still think that might go to possibly Yuri Laterra or Jordan Wheel. There's two final spots just because they don't see any way in which they don't want, seeing how last season ended, where they don't have Yuri Laterra in the lineup. And if they do, and when they did, he was playing center, so most likely he'll probably go back to being center, and Lawton will probably go to back to wing or maybe center of the fourth line. But that's kind of how I would see it. And if that is the case, the third line will possibly look like maybe like a Wheel, Simmons, and Lindblom, and the fourth line of Lawton, Laterra, and Lier or Raffle. Most likely Raffle, actually, not really Lier. Lier might be like a healthy scratch. I don't know how much more release time he'll get. I've liked what I've seen from him. I still think he should be probably playing over Laterra or whatever, but they, for some reason, want to have him in the lineup. I don't know if it's because of his contract or of what they saw from him last season on the penalty kill and everything, that he brings something to the team or whatever. So we'll see how that goes. That's another thing to kind of focus on is how they figure out the center spot for the third line center, or kind of the bottom six. That's kind of the question mark at the moment. The top six is obvious. That's the bottom six is where it's a little more dicey. That's kind of a thing to look at. And obviously, with the McDonald injury, what defenseman ends up going in, and obviously with this injury, Sanheim is definitely a lock for the season in the lineup. So that's some good news for if you're a Travis Sanheim fan, which I am. Because seeing how he played last season, it's just well-deserved to be on this team. He was way too good for the Phantom, so I think he'll fit in well here. It's just how the Flyers go about pairing them, or putting who they put him with, and everything. So, and I think with that being said, those are just a couple of things to kind of focus on. But I think that might be it. I'm Mike. Obviously, you can check me out on Whitmer_96 on Twitter, the Mike Whitmer podcast on YouTube and on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter so you can kind of get the updates and everything on any podcasts you miss. The Mike and Mitch podcast obviously is still out there. Jeff has been on the past couple times. Mitch has gone back to school, so we've been trying to get more of a weekly podcast in there. But yeah, I think with that being said, see you guys.